Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We are about three-quarters of the way through Black History Month. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who founded this wonderful, wonderful holiday, said that he didn't want us to just look at Black history, but he wanted us to see Blacks in history. Indeed, Blacks and Black Americans in particular have been able to bend history because of this unique position that America holds in the world and the unique position that Black people have held in the United States. We've had quite the experience. And Corey Peterson Smith, who's a Michael Ratner Fellow for Middle East Studies at the Institute for Policy Studies, has a tremendous essay. But of course, part of the family here is, of course, attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian and lawyer and author. I wanted to start with him as we talk about Black history or Blacks in history and our connections to struggles all over the world. People look at us all over the world for inspiration. So Bernadette and Robert and everybody else, I want you to like and share. Meet me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social or X at SantitaJ. The Santita Jackson and Friends page, that's where I can get friends, everybody. Please go there. You all are still going to Santita Jackson. I can't take anyone there. Go to Santita Jackson and Friends, please. And let's get right to it. Attorney Mark Fancher, when we look at Blacks in history and where we are in America, what is it that you see? I know that's really broad, but there's just so much as we welcome Curry to the show. Black history, just very simply, Black History Month, given this direct descendant of slaves, of enslaved people, because that is who, that is the lineage of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. What does this holiday, this month mean to you? This time of commemoration.
Well, it at minimum provides a reminder of the central importance of understanding history. I think, unfortunately, there are too many who, when the question of Black history comes up, their immediate thought is, okay, well, let's talk about Dr. King's dream and let's talk about that a Black man invented the traffic light and Black man did a whole lot with peanuts, and okay, we're done. And that's not really the value of Black history. History generally can be used as a weapon. And unfortunately, it has historically been used as a weapon against us. We have the opportunity to use it as a weapon for purposes of liberation. And the value in it is being able to look at where we've been and what we've done, the connections between events which are seemingly separate and distinguishable, and but in actuality are very much connected, and which explain our current predicament, our current
I get all of
challenges.
these freezes. Distinguishable, and please continue. You froze for a hot second.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
That's
all
okay.
of these
Wasn't
things
you?
that, yeah, that are distinguishable but yet connected.
Mhm.
And so someone could presumably look at the insurrection, the rebellion, the revolt of Nat Turner, and look at it in isolation and say, well, at least one brother had, you know, something inside that made him want to stand up and resist. Because unfortunately, many people who are descended from enslaved people are afraid to acknowledge that they are, because they believe that, for the most part, enslaved people just sat back and took it. And they're very ashamed of that. And they don't understand the reality. The reality is that enslaved people were fighting day in and day out. They were running away from plantations. They were setting fire to crops. They were breaking farm equipment. They were putting poison in the master's food. They were doing everything they could to resist. But this was not something that was done in isolation. It goes all the way back to Africa.
Mhm.
If you look at what was happening in southwestern Africa, in the Angola region, there was a warrior queen named Nzinga who was renowned globally for her military genius. She resisted the efforts of the Portuguese to come in and enslave her people time and time again. Her reputation was so well known that there were brothers all over Africa who wanted to come and fight under the leadership of this sister. That's how bad she was. And, she was overcome only by age and infirmity. Otherwise, she probably could have been kicking Portuguese butts up until now. But her contribution was not limited to just what she did in Angola, because she instilled in those people who fought under her not only a fighting spirit, but a sense of military strategy, a knowledge of how to fight and how to engage against oppressive forces. And Randall Robinson pointed out in one of his books how many of the people who were fighting under her were the ancestors of people who ended up in Haiti.
Mhm.
And so the culture, the military culture that was born in the Angola region, found its way into Haiti and contributed in a substantial way to the ability of the people of Haiti to fend off the French when they tried to reinstitute slavery after they had fought and negotiated it away. Under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines and others, they were able to defeat Napoleon's people, which is something that was no small feat given his success around the world. But it didn't stop there because the example that was set by the people who waged the Haitian Revolution was something that people in North America knew about. And it is said that Nat Turner and others who organized insurrections and rebellions in North America, in the United States, were inspired by the Haitian Revolution. And not only were they inspired by it, but they also decided that if they could get free and get away, then that would be their destination if they couldn't get to Africa. So we see this connection
Mhm.
between events which seem to be separate and apart, but which are connected. And the inspiration provided by Nat Turner inspired people who came later, whether it was the Deacons for Defense, or the Black Panther Party, or Robert Williams, or any number of people who have continued to fight and resist against oppressive forces. But it doesn't stop there. Because if you look at, and our brother here is probably going to talk about it, but you look at other struggles in other parts of the world. The Nicaragua for a very long time
Mhm.
was dominated by a tyrant named Anastasio Somoza,
Mhm.
who was, they used to say, it was a saying in North America where they would point to dictators in Latin America and they'd say, yeah, he's an SOB, but he's our SOB. Well, Anastasio Somoza was one of their SOBs, and he was a brutal one, a vicious one. And the people of Nicaragua, under the leadership of
Daniel
Augusto
Ortega.
Sandino, became the namesake for the Sandinista Liberation Front, which waged a revolution which drove Somoza and his family out of Nicaragua and began a revolution. Um, when you ask them about what inspired them, one of the first things they said was the people who were waging the Black Power struggle in the United States.
Mhm.
And years before the United States decided to make Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday, the Sandinistas did it in Nicaragua.
Mhm.
And you see uh, Nelson Mandela, when he gets out of prison, what is the first thing that he does? Because he and those who had fought with him had inspired the Palestine Liberation Organization, had inspired the people who fought and to get some degree of liberation in Libya, had inspired the people of Cuba. They had in turn returned the favor and supported the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. So even at a time when Yasser Arafat was vilified, was
Mhm.
was 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 demonized as a horrible person, at a time when Muammar Gaddafi was called a terrorist, at a time when Fidel Castro was cast as the greatest monster of the Western Hemisphere. Nelson Mandela, the first thing he did when he got out of prison after giving Winnie a hug was to get on a plane and go to see Fidel Castro, to go see Yasser Arafat, and to see Muammar Gaddafi.
Mhm.
And people were just shaking their heads. What? I mean, how dare he? Well, he dared to do it because he understood international solidarity and the interconnectedness of these struggles of the oppressed against oppressors. So Black history is more than just remembering the names of some people who were inventors and
Mhm.
firsts. Black history is about understanding what actually happened, how it happened, why it happened, and then using it as a weapon to figure our way forward in our struggle that's ongoing.
Attorney Mark Fancher, always giving us such a brilliant perspective. Indeed, we have to see our history as more than a juxtaposition against whiteness. I'm the first person to do this as white people have been doing it. No, we've had civilizations going back to the beginning of time. Indeed, we gave birth to civilization because we gave birth to humanity. So it's important for us to look at, I guess, Mark, given your remarks, it really leads up to what this brilliant scholar, Curry Peterson Smith, the Michael Ratner, a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, studying the Middle East, really focusing on that as he has tied the struggle in Palestine to the Palestine black struggle in the United States. And the reason I fuse the two is because there has been so much connection. Attorney Mark Fancher, you can hear uh, civil rights workers and leaders in the 50s and 60s talking about Palestine, most progressive, going back to Paul Robeson. I mean, we were very clear then. I remember um, when Andrew Young was fired as the UN ambassador to because he had a backdoor, a back channel meeting with the Palestinian representative at the United Nations that my mother had pushed him to take. And he said to my mother, he said, Jackie, you do know that I will lose my job if I take this meeting. But she had just come back from Lebanon and she had been with Yasser Arafat for more than a week. And even their drivers were getting killed, Mark. You've heard me talk about this before. And they'd come back and half their hotel, Curie, would be bombed. My mother was so traumatized she couldn't even come home. She had to go to Paris for a week just to decompress because she was coming home to 5 kids and a husband and his life. And my father said, no, you just stay there because she had never experienced anything like this in her life. But he did take the meeting. He was fired and he could not make a living in the United States for decades. Such is the price. The biggest foes and the biggest threats to Reverend Jackson's life during his presidential campaigns came from the JDL. That's that was very real. That's why we had the Nation of Islam, the Fruit of Islam, protecting Reverend. And the Secret Service came on earlier than they had ever done in their history. But we still keep fighting. And we're not fighting against Israelis. It was always about having a just society and a peaceful world. But what is surprising is that when you get over there, Curie and Mark, what brought tears to my parents' eyes was my parents went over there, right? People sent pictures to us the night Reverend spoke at the Democratic Convention in 1984. And you saw all of these kids in Palestine with Jesse Jackson pictures, waving them. Any bit of sunlight, because he actually campaigned on justice for them. Um, and I'm just bringing the struggle into context. This is not as personal for me as struggle is. And so and so that brings me to this wonderful essay in which you reminded us about the importance, just as Mark did, of Black History Month. Not, if it was, I think what you're both telling us is that we're kind of off the point of Black history, Curry. You said the uncensored Black history offers lessons in global struggles for liberation. You begin, our time is shaped by Israel's genocidal assault in Gaza, but it is also shaped by the largest mobilization of opposition to U.S. support for Israel in this country's history. And within this wave of protest, we see, among other things, the inescapable connections between Black America and people who are oppressed and marginalized around the world. Before I ask you what you were talking about, I want to know what inspired that. I mean, what, because as Mark said, we're accustomed to the first Black person to do this is blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that that's not important because these people took massive hits to do what they did. But you're saying, wait a minute, it's a little bit bigger than this. And when I see the picture in Truth Out, which is where this is published, um, I see a young Marion Barry sitting in front of Dr. Martin Luther King. I see Dr. Bernard Lafayette, so many people I've known.
Mm.
And people who continued, who went on from there, people from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who went on from there and who the struggle was their life. So talk to me. Why do you think it's important for Black Americans to be connected to this global struggle and to know how much we contributed to it, how much we've inspired it?
Yeah, and how much we've been inspired by it,
Mhm.
which is I feel really honored and kind of filled to be in this conversation because what both of you are talking about are these lineages, you know. I think that when uh, I've had the experience so many times of organizing with activists of my generation, and it's like we feel like we're the first people to have ever encountered a problem, you know, and um, when in fact all of our generations, there's a lineage before all of us,
Mhm.
whether we know it or not. And I think that if we know it, then we'll be that much more effective. And you realize that um, you're not alone. I mean, one of the things that when you talk about Palestinian children holding up photos of Jesse Jackson, it's this sense of we're not alone in the world
Mhm.
because so much of this colonial violence, this white supremacist violence, is about isolating communities, saying nobody cares about you, and it's that connection is so powerful. That's why these children held up Jesse Jackson's photo, and so when we are waging our struggle in the United States, again, we're told that it's very isolating, and even that our history is very isolated. I mean, as somebody who grew up after the civil rights era and grew up in the Northeast, I was told my whole life that the civil rights and kind of Black freedom struggle, that was something that existed between this year and this year and was localized to the American South, and that's all you need to know.
You
um,
were really told that.
oh yeah, that was all we learned. I mean, it was Dr. King, doing what he did in Alabama and Georgia. And I will say, part of that was about kind of isolating this problem of American racism as really, it's kind of minimizing it,
Mhm.
because the reality is, we're talking about a transatlantic slave trade. I mean, it's like Brother Mark was saying, and we're talking about a transatlantic slave trade that shaped the whole world, really, but especially the Americas and especially this country to this day, right? And if you say, well, Dr. King just had a dream, and this was really about segregated lunch counter and water fountains, and that was kind of, that had to be addressed. And once that was addressed, the dream is over. We won, and here we are. I mean, that was really the kind of narrative that I was taught.
But it
And
seems to
as
me
I,
that you read the whole speech, though. I mean, as I was looking at your essay, you said, "Wait a minute,
yeah,
that's just
there's
that is
more to it.
so, there's much more to it." And many people, even people who might have been there or who were around at that time, they don't remember that. Or they don't think about that. They stop
Yeah.
the dream. You didn't stop there.
Well, there's something, and this is the thing, and this is why I so appreciate a conversation about Black History Month, because even, I mean, there's so much that has, okay, let me put it this way. The Black freedom struggle, centuries long, but particularly the last great moment of upheaval in the 1960s was at the center of every other massive struggle in this country. I mean, the struggle against the war in Southeast Asia, the struggle for women's liberation, the struggle, for the
LGBTQ,
rights of. I mean, it
Stonewall.
was everything,
Yeah.
and I think that the people who run this country and who've wanted to keep it as it is said this can never happen again. We can never let Black folks go in motion again, because it shakes when Black folks move, it shakes the whole thing.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, even kind of learning that there was a time when Dr. King Day didn't exist, and
Mhm.
that folks fought for that is kind of mind blowing to me, because by time I grew up, Dr. King Day was a kind of strange, opportunity to talk about how great the U.S. is, and actually how, this is a more perfect union, and that, you know, so,
It's a
but,
day to
but, but,
volunteer.
what's
It's a
that?
day to it's a day to volunteer, which has been
It's a
so
day to
offensive.
volunteer, yeah,
Yeah.
right, the day of service, and it's like, so, but as you said, if you read the whole speech, if you read the "I Have a Dream" speech, and if you read "Letter from Birmingham Jail," which that was for me the thing that really kind of blew my mind open.
Mhm.
Our history, it has these clues of where to look. And, the older I got, the more I kind of like noticed those clues. And so, we're talking about Black internationalism, right? And kind of the place of the Black freedom struggle here in relationship to all these struggles around the world. And the more I learned that there's a global context, it had me circle back to what I learned about Dr. King when I was a kid. Because I learned, for example, Dr. King was inspired by Gandhi. Cool, And what I was taught was that Dr. King was inspired by Gandhi's nonviolence, which is true. But as I learned more about the history of Black internationalism, I circled back and said, wait a minute, it wasn't just Gandhi's nonviolence. Gandhi was an anti-colonial leader fighting for
Yeah.
the decolonization of South Africa and of India. That was the context that inspired Dr. King, right? And that's a version of Dr. King that we don't get, and it's in Letter from Birmingham Jail. He talks about
Mhm.
how, and I can't, I'll paraphrase, it won't be as eloquent as Dr. King, but he's basically saying we're being left behind. He's like, we are watching our brothers and sisters in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. They're decolonizing.
Mhm.
They're waging struggles for new societies, and we can't even sit at a desegregated lunch counter, you know? And so he took inspiration from these global struggles and saw the freedom struggle here in that context. So, that's what's on my mind when I think about the moment that you brought up. I wrote that piece last year, really at the high point. This is kind of right before the student encampments, but after the November 4th, 2023 protest, which was in DC. This is the largest mobilization for Palestine in U.S. history. You
Mhm.
know, um, and right. I mean, it comes in a lineage, and it's a lineage of internationalism in this country, including Black internationalism.
Mhm. But Mark, do you think what is it? Let me just ask you this: what is it about the Black American experience that is so inspiring, not separating us from any others, Because you've got black people. I mean, more black people were sent to South and Central America and the Caribbean than to the United States. But America has always seen itself as this singular nation, right? And it's become, at least up until now, the wealthiest, most powerful nation on earth. And yet, as a minority group, we fought the power and we won every single time that we fought. That means something, Attorney Fancher.
It does, and I think that that's largely because the hand of God has been on us. But beyond that, I think a lot of it has to do with the style in which we have struggled. There are so many people around the world who are terribly intimidated by the oppressors, by the imperialists, by those who dominate them. They are inclined to cower in fear in the face of them. Um, the way in which we have struggled has been so stylish and so fearless that I think that many people around the world have really been inspired by the way in which we've done that. I mean, you think about it. I mean, it took a lot when you're on the plantation to even deal with the conditions from day to day. But somehow you make a way out of no way. When they won't even feed you, you go rescue the entrails of pigs from the garbage and you turn it into a delicacy. You manage to somehow manufacture insurrections and rebellions. You find common cause with indigenous peoples and fight off the U.S. government in Florida and defeat them militarily. You do these kinds of things, and then moving forward, certainly, even Dr. King, even though people like to portray him as this meek, mild-mannered kind of a fellow, think about what he inspired and led people to do. He had people standing out there facing down rednecks, spitting racial slurs, armed National Guards people, police, fire hoses, and dogs, and standing there with their backs straight without fear.
Wait a
I
minute. If I could add this, while J. Edgar Hoover is personally threatening him, I mean, no, blackmailing him, he sends tapes to his wife and brings him into his office and presents tapes and pictures to him. And yet he continued.
yeah, I mean, how can you not be inspired by that? And then you go forward and you look at the Panthers who
Oh,
pick up rifles and go and police who are brutalizing people on the street, and they've got their rifles there, and they're saying, "Yeah, hit him again, MFer, and see what we got for you." I mean, how can you not be inspired by that?
mhm.
So I think that it's really been the style in which we've struggled, the successes that we've had, and people look at that and go, "Wow." I mean, these are some special people, and it inspires them to fight and to organize and to mobilize. But I'll add this, and I think that we have every reason to be proud of what we've done. We have every reason to be quite satisfied with the ways in which we've inspired not just people and oppressed people around the world, but people in this country to struggle and fight. But at the same time, we've got to continue to be mature about how we deal with what we're doing. Right now, I run into so many, Black people who whose attitude is, "Hey, those Arabs wouldn't stand with us in this last election. Well, forget them.
Yes.
Those Latinos, hey, they want to throw in with Trump. Well, forget them. We're on our own now."
Mhm.
That's immature. It's politically immature.
Why do you say that?
I
Because
say that
there's
because
so much of that now.
while there's an understandable emotional reaction and there's understandable resentment about it, ultimately it's self-defeating. In the same way that we have had to go through certain things and learn things and become more educated, more enlightened, and more conscious by doing things that were ill-advised, they have to do that too. We're veterans at this. We're further along the road in our political development than they are, and they don't see things that we see. They don't analyze things in the same way. And I'll give you some concrete examples. You know, there was a time in our history back in the 1950s and early 1960s when if you asked people, you know, if you could get a black mayor, would your problems be solved? All of them would say, oh, yeah, that's freedom. We get a black mayor, we're free. We didn't know that that would not lead to liberation. Now, hundreds of black mayors later, we've grown. We know that that's not the key to our liberation. You go a few years after that and you say, all right, well, we're struggling now for political rights. And we've got these white racists who are giving us trouble down in the South. What's the answer to this? How can we get them off our backs? Well, we should call the federal government and call the FBI and get them to get them off our backs. We didn't know. We didn't know about J. Edgar Hoover and all of the things that he was doing to fight against us. But now we've learned. We know all about COINTELPRO. We never would fall victim to any kind of line about using the FBI to try and help us in our struggle. They're the enemy. And then you go forward, even after that, and you ask people if we could get a black president, would we be free? They say, yeah, of course we would. That's the ultimate. That's the leader of the free world. We'll be free. We got a black president, and now we know. We've grown. So all that I'm saying is that while people may not make the decisions that we think that they should make right now, while they may make errors that are miscalculations, we have to be patient. We have to understand that ultimately the only way that we win this is by forming bonds of solidarity with oppressed people everywhere and giving them the opportunity to develop, helping them to learn from their errors, and then to move forward. Because truth be told, personally, if I had the attitude that many people have toward Latinos and towards Arabs, I would have that attitude toward my own people. Because every day I'm frustrated by the fact that they are so committed to the Democratic Party. They really continue to think they somehow are going to transform the Democratic Party and somehow use that as a way of liberating our people. And it frustrates me. And if I had that attitude, I would say later for y'all, but no, I have to tell myself, no, be patient. They got to go through it. They got to learn. They've got to have the experience. And then one day, I don't know whether it's 4 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years, they'll finally say, oh, okay, I see. I get it. So, you know, Kwame Ture used to say that the job of the revolutionary is not to tell people where to go. The job of the revolutionary is to look at where they're ultimately going to go, because you know who they are and what they want, and then try and help them get there faster. That's all that I can do.
Thank you for that. Because what we've done is we've shifted from one party to the next and then we'll shift to another and another and another without understanding, okay, it's not the party, it's the proposition, Curry. It's like we have to decide that we're going to be free, we're going to be liberated, we're going to be equal. And that everybody else in the world, we have to determine that everyone else in the country and around the world has to be that too, in order for us to hold on to our freedom. You know, because I think Mark does make the brilliant point. And you really hear this, Mark, though. Please open up your mics, everybody, because I want you all to jump in. It's really, I hear that from upper class blacks a lot, particularly the TV punditry, who make a lot of money, who are insured, and who vote in the elite circles. And elections have consequences. Well, don't talk to us now. Because, see, if you had Kamala, I'm like, wait. Kamala would not say anything about Gaza. Stop. For a whole lot of reasons. Number one, she was rolling with Biden's crew. They hamstrung her. And the way the system is structured, given the influences in the system, she didn't have any space. So if you really think that even what Trump is doing now was something that she was not going to do, you really don't understand how this works. These people, the Democrats, did not seek to change Jerusalem, even though we didn't move our embassy there. they didn't seek to change that. They weren't trying to upend the Abraham Accords. Mark Curie. I mean, we have been willing to let this go. We have let this go on. So a lot of this to me is like, wait a minute. But I know the good thing for me is that we do eventually get it. Now, it might take us a minute. It might take us a minute, but my father said we have not been here all these hundreds of years, not getting it for long. Eventually, he said, black folks will wake up. He said, now I might not see it. Dr. King said, I've seen where you're gonna go. I might not get there with you, but I promise you, I've seen the glory. And the Lord is over there. And by the way, when he said that, he was also letting you know that you're only gonna get there with God, which in this moment we have also left behind. So we got a lot of stuff we got to figure out right through here. So, and still people all around the world look to Black Americans. And they have vested so much hope in us. Because even when you see frustrated Latinos in social media, it's because even if they take us for granted, even if they ignore us, even if they have been in coalition with us, we're still the reference point for freedom and liberation in the United States and in the world. Who else produced Dr. King? Who else produced Malcolm X and Frederick Douglass and Paul Robeson? I mean, coming out of this cauldron, Mark, you've talked about it so much. This system, this is the fiercest system you got. I mean, apartheid was based upon what they did here. So I want you all to speak to that, please. Because to me, I don't think that Black Americans give ourselves the credit. I think that if we gave ourselves the credit, like you said, Corey, it would be so empowering for us.
Well, if I can say one thing that was so important for me, honestly, was leaving this country and talking to activists from movements elsewhere around the world. And that's when I really came to understand the place of the Black freedom struggle in the US, the place that has all around the world. I had the great honor during the kind of wave of Black Lives Matter struggle, after 2014, the Ferguson uprising, and 2015 was the Baltimore uprising. I mean, that whole kind of moment, I got to travel to Australia and to Greece to speak with activists who were fighting their own struggles. And I was I was shocked by what people knew about us. I was shocked, doing an interview with Australian public radio and trying to explain what Ferguson, Missouri was, and they knew. They knew what Ferguson was and where it was and who the governor of Missouri was and that he deployed the National Guard. I mean, they knew because they'd been following it. And they were so inspired by that uprising. And of course, actually, during that uprising, there was not one but two statements of solidarity from Palestine, which was really the inspiration for me and another comrade of mine to start Black for Palestine, to start, a project that was about trying to cultivate solidarity here among Black folks, in this era with Palestine. But it was that connection or that engagement with folks around the world that gave me pause and helped me understand the significance of our struggle for the world. And it makes sense that that we're deprived of that, right? That we're denied that. I mean, what Brother Mark, what you're saying about it's not just that we have fought, but how we have fought, with style. I mean, as you said, who would not be inspired by that? But if you're invested in the status quo, who would not be threatened by that? So, I think that's part of the work is helping folks here now to understand historically and today that we exist in a global context, in a transnational context, to know that there was an organization in Australia called the Black Panthers of Indigenous folks, not only directly inspired by the Panthers here, but in relationship with the Panthers. I mean, they were considered a formal chapter of the Panthers, and the Polynesian Panthers in New Zealand, and the Dalit Panthers in India. You know, I think it's really important that Black folks today know about that.
Well, why don't you? Well, no, Mark, what were you about to say?
No, I was going to say, and it's also important for us to know about what's happening now. Because one of the things that's very interesting about what happened in this country is that you had Dr. King, and then when he was assassinated, and you had the emergence of more militant activists and voices, the Black Power movement, and all of that, there was a calculation made by the power structure and the mainstream media, and what they concluded was that King and the civil rights movement were representative of where mainstream Black America was. And that now you have all of these people who are shouting and screaming and waving their fists in the air and all of that. If we want to shut this thing down, then what we need to do is we need to put the cameras on them as much as possible. And it will scare Black people to death. They'll run and retreat and they'll hide from these people. And we'll be done with all of this Black resistance thing. Well, they put the cameras on Angela Davis, they put them on Huey Newton, they put them on Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown, Eldridge Cleaver, and all of these guys. And to their shock, Black people ran toward them. I mean, and the intensity of the militant resistance, escalated in ways that they never imagined. And it's important to understand that because then they made a calculation. They said, never again will we build up the image or the profile of any type of militant resistance in this country. And it's important to understand that because now, in the wake of that, there are so many people who, when we talk about our problems, they say, well, where are our leaders? We don't have anybody of the caliber and the quality of Malcolm X or Dr. King. We don't have anybody like that. Why don't we have anybody like that? You got them. You got them all over the place. I mean, you got Curry Peterson Smith. You got who knows how many people who are thinking and analyzing along the same lines and in ways that are far more advanced than the people who were present in the 60s and the 70s. But the cameras are never going to focus on these people. And so, and unfortunately, we've been trained to think that unless it's appearing on CNN or NBC or ABC, then it's not happening. Mm-hmm. We need to look really hard at what's happening really in our communities, the degree of organizing and analysis that's taking place, and to continue to organize. Gil Scott-Heron was not wrong. I don't care what Kendrick Lamar says. The revolution will not be televised. And the real one won't. And we really have to make sure that we don't miss it.
And be vigilant. Open your eyes so that you can see. Pay attention to who's given attention, who's elevated, and who's smeared. Because that's a very, very real thing. I was talking with attorney Daryl Jones, who you all have been on the show with countless times. And I was speaking with him earlier today. And I said, would you like to come on? He said, oh, we were talking about something. I said, oh, darn, would you like to come on? Because we're going to be talking about this, be an exciting discussion. He said, I would love to. He said, but I'm going to jail. I said, what? He said, oh, no, he's a lawyer. He said, I got to go see one of my clients. I said, well, now, when you're in South Africa, if you haven't been to jail, you are suspect. And to me in the United States, if you've not been under investigation, if you don't have an FBI file, who are you? If you don't have a file, then you've been doing the filing. That's just been my experience. And so I think, we have to really understand that when Malcolm X was killed, he was speaking to a half empty, a mostly empty room. The Masonic Temple in Memphis was not completely full the night before Dr. King was killed, when he gave his last public speech. He had been locked out of virtually every black pulpit in the United States. More than 50%, more than 55% of black people disapproved of him. It was because of black disapproval of him that he became vulnerable and he could be assassinated. That's real. We have to understand that. So we have to look at the people who are elevated by the establishment. Look at them. Look at them. Michael Jackson was fine as long as he was singing and dancing. But when he was going to go to Sony and get the money they owed him, if they paid him what they owed him, he would have bankrupted the company, everybody. Michael was buying catalogs. You didn't see him posed up with cars and houses. No, 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 no. He became one of the three biggest music moguls on earth. Every song Patsy Cline sang, he owned, for example. He tried to give Little Richard his catalog back. Sony forbade it. And he knew he was not going to live long because of what he was seeking to do, that is to be free. Because he sat up under Berry Gordy as a little boy. And he formed a board of directors as he got older. And he put Berry Gordy on it, John Johnson. When they were about to take his entire fortune, he came to Reverend Jackson. They were going to take his billions of dollars for $300,000. He just showed up at the office. He said, I think you're the only person I know you're the only person who can help me. This was about 3 or 4 years before he died. We have to understand what we mean when you see Prince seeking to own himself. He lived on top of his masters. There's a reason. Stax Records, Al Bell was almost killed sitting in a studio with all of his masters. We need to understand who we are and how important we are. And so, I think that's why tying us to these struggles, because that's why our culture, our words, everything that we do means so much, everybody. And that's why I was so struck by your essay, Curie, because also, Mark, he's like our baby. And I don't say that in a patronizing way, because you've got the baton. We have more years behind us than we have ahead. Doesn't mean we're trying to get out of you anytime soon. But you're going to be in a world that we've yet to see. And I might not see it, and that's okay. But there's something that you see that gives me so much hope, Mark, before you go. I want you to say something to not just our young brother, but our son, Curry Peterson Smith, because that's what you are. And, because I think you understand where Dr. Carter G. Woodson, I think he understands where Dr. Carter G. Woodson was. He said, not just black folks making history, being the first, aside from white folks, to do this. He said, no, blacks in history. We're in it and we bend it. Mark Fancher.
No, I think that he is blessed with wisdom far beyond his years, as demonstrated by his piece. I would just say that not just to him, but to all of us, that liberation means, in addition to economic independence and political independence and social independence, mental independence. The other three are harder to get, but we can free our minds. And I think that we need to divorce ourselves from the madness that is the United States of America. There are so many who are moaning about the fact that Donald Trump is the president. I don't like the man. I don't like what he's doing. But what I do know is that he's so lacking in political skill and finesse He is not shrewd in the sense that a politician generally is. And he's doing all of the things that all of them would do, Democrats, Republicans, whoever they are. He's doing all of those things in a very clumsy, uh, incompetent kind of a way, making it easy for us to see what this country is all about. And so it's not that these things that he's trying to do, they would not have been trying to do anyway. They just would have been doing them in a way that most of us would have not noticed it. There would not have been an Elon Musk on TV every night. There would not have been a whole slew of executive orders doing all of these things as quickly as they are, but it would have been getting done because it is part of the imperial agenda.
Yeah.
And I think that once we recognize what this country is all about, and I've said it before, that the one thing I agree with Donald Trump about is that when he said that God saved him from dying from that bullet, I believe that because had he died, then he would have become a martyr. All of these people around the country who already admired him would have venerated, they would have raised him to a level of sainthood.
Deification.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes. And they would have been forever lost in terms of what he would have done to make America great again. And we who never liked him would always believe that the Democratic Party is a better alternative, and we were somehow blessed by that. We've been blessed by the fact that he lived and that he's doing the things that he's doing because he's opening up a lot of eyes, making people a lot more conscious. They just need to understand that it's not him. They need to understand that it is America. This is what this country is all about. And if we understand that and we liberate ourselves from that mentally, then it makes it a whole lot easier for us to liberate ourselves economically, politically, and socially. And stay prayed up.
Curie, you have the final word here. Because indeed, you've taken our struggle where it's supposed to be, which is on this world stage. Frederick Douglass was an internationalist. And my father's often said that Black people understand foreign relations because we came over here on a foreign policy.
Mm.
This is what we do. this we know. And what did you say, Gandhi? He wasn't just looking at the nonviolent struggle. No, he was an anti-colonialist. He was an anti-imperialist.
Right.
Dr. King connected to that. And
right.
How can do you think we're connecting to that? I mean, tell me about your generation.
I think that we are, I think that we need to find our way.
Okay.
And I think that we have to figure out this freedom struggle that, again, it's centuries long, but there's different chapters over time. And I think we need to figure out what this chapter looks like, and how to do that and what that's going to look like. That's going to be a process. But I got to say, I'm really, and I'll say this to you, but also to people in my generation and younger. I just, it's not lost on me what it means to have these dialogues with folks like you. I mean, what Brother Mark just said about needing to be independent, and what you just said, I mean, not just about our political independence, but the independence of Stax Records and Motown and, our cultural independence. That is something that folks in your generation and elder generations have been telling me. I keep on hearing it, and I'm like, okay, this must be important if I keep on hearing it from different people.
Yeah.
So it is that thing about, on one hand, I do think that this is, we're in new terrain, not new terrain, we're in unfamiliar terrain. The terrain that's unfamiliar to people in my generation. I think unfamiliar to a lot of people in this country, truthfully. I think that the way that folks are talking about Donald Trump, you and I have talked about this. There are people's points of reference are, not very helpful, respectfully. You know what I mean? When people are saying, okay, he's saying he wants to own Gaza, but I thought that he was an isolationist, but is he actually a hawk? And I just think that the terms and points of references that are within folks' sort of recent memory are insufficient for understanding what all we're dealing with. I personally have been going back to the 1920s and just to the time before the 1930s, a time when open white supremacists were in the White House, open white supremacists, a time when the federal government did not look the way it does, a time when the U.S. was very enthusiastically talking about seizing territory. This stuff is not unprecedented, but I do think that we have to look in the right places, and also feel this out, like what this is this time around, and that's going to take time. I really appreciate Brother Mark spoke with a kind of like the need for a patience and a generosity, both with other communities and with ourselves. So I appreciate that, because this is complex. And as we figure this out, we don't have to do it alone. Like what a blessing that we have. I will say I cannot believe that I get to be face to face with you, who embodies a lineage that goes directly to Dr. King in his last days, into that whole era. And that itself was informed by another lineage that came before that. And this is like the most precious thing. And I just think that we have to engage with it, which I guess is the purpose of Black History Month, right? Like, isn't that the whole point? Is to find, to engage with the richness that exists in our histories?
Well, it is my profound honor and blessing. It's such a gift to know that you are here, to know that all of the work, it has taken root and it is flowering in you. My father met Judge Greg Mathis when he was in jail. His father was a man of the streets. His brother was a drug addict. His other brother stole drugs. He was trying not to be in the life, but he was in danger of getting swept up. He promised his mother shortly before death, he said, I'll never be here again. My father would go to jails routinely, and he would say, hey, up with hope, down with dope. If you can believe it, if your heart can believe it, your mind, if you can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it. He felt it was his obligation to go to high schools and to jails, wherever people had been ignored or left behind. And one day, someone he did not know, Greg Mathis, was in the audience. And as he was leaving, he would hug the prisoners and because my father's not afraid of our people. And Greg walked up to him and just hugged him. He said, Sir, Reverend, when I get out of here, I want to work for you. He said, son, first you got to get out of here. But then you got to get education. Once you get that education, we can do some things. Well, my father stayed with him, got him connected to someone who was very close to us in Detroit. And he stayed with him. And when he was just getting into law school, he made him the youth director of his presidential campaign. Greg was like, I got a record.
Wow.
And he said, so what? He said, Reverend, I've never done this before. He said, I've never run for president before. Organize these kids. Bye, Greg. He said, I stood there. I just put him on the plane. I was like, what is he doing? Because he believed in him. And look at him now. Look at him. I see you, Curry. And I see these children. I even see the children who cursed Reverend out in Ferguson and told him to leave. Because I knew they had been lied to about who he is. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Santita Jackson, everybody keep hope alive. Happy Black History Month. I will continue. What they did, and it broke his heart, but he understood. See, what happened coming out of Memphis, the reason Dr. King hired Reverend was because he was a brilliant organizer. And so Reverend James Bevel advocated for him in a big way because he was like, this guy is, and Dr. King knew my father from his college days because he was president of student government at North Carolina A&T, which is where they'd had the sit-ins. He was the president of Omega Psi Phi, second Grand Basileus, which is the highest office that an undergraduate can hold in the fraternity. And I just found that he was the only person in the history of the fraternity who, as an undergraduate, almost became the Grand Basileus. He fell short by like 3 or 4 votes. They said, we knew he was special then. Well, coming out of it, my father was in Chicago, and we had meetings where hundreds of people were coming, and he was doing the organizing and the boycotting. And he'd also become the chief fundraiser next to Dr. King for SELC. So coming out of, and he had a full scholarship Rockefeller Foundation grant to go to the University of Chicago, which he left a semester shy of his graduation to go work for Dr. King. So he had been targeted, right? And so coming out of Memphis, his reputation was stained. Oh, he wasn't really talking. He wasn't the last person talking to Dr. King. And now you even hear some young people say he had something to do with his killing. Thankfully, Judge Joe Brown, who is not a fan of Reverend, bless his heart, but he did this trial that they had when James Earl Ray was still alive just before he was killed. And he targeted some people that we knew. He said, I bumped into Reverend at the airport and we sat together on the plane. And he said something that let me know that he was not involved in any of this. He said to me, if there's any way that I can help you find out what happened, he said, call me at any time. We need to know. Because they were pressing, he and a few other people pressed Mrs. King for years. Push the government. You're the only one with the moral authority to do it. Push them. Because they said they did this. They did this.
Yeah.
And we need to hold them accountable. And Judge Brown said the reason, he said, I think they went after Jesse is because they saw him as a threat. Because that's what we do, right? So when the kids came at him in Ferguson, and other older people said, whoa, do you know who he is? Well, I don't give a, okay, got it. No, you should care. But that's what we do. And Larry Flint, who was a very, very progressive guy who was very supportive of Reverend. I remember seeing him. He used to come to our big dinner in California every year. And he said, you do know that your father will never receive the credit that he is due while he's living. He's too powerful. He said, that is why, he said, that's part of the reason I support him, because I know what he's up against. We need to understand, and I'm not, you guys, I'm not making a case for my dad. I'm making a case for the freedom struggle everywhere.
Yeah.
I said to you earlier, Malcolm was speaking to a half-empty room. They had been trying to shoot out his home with his pregnant wife and 4 children. He knew that he was on borrowed time. He knew it. He knew it. Dr. King knew it. My father lived like it, because we never expected him to live past 39. I've said that to you all before. This is the struggle. That's why when Mandela got here, after he had been freed, and Ted Koppel was trying to push him on Yasser Arafat, the Palestinians, and when Mandela looked at him and said, "I don't get involved in your domestic affairs," he was supportive of me.
Mm.
And before, I mean, and Ted Koppel was ready for him, but Mandela was really ready for him. He said, "Have I paralyzed you?" Because he had no response. He said, "Now my allies are my allies." But see, there is a disconnect some of us receive. That we have. I was reading the biography, a memoir of a woman for whom I have tremendous admiration, Sheila Johnson, one of the co-founder of BET, and she's a brilliant musician. And I'm a musician. She heard me sing at Ron Brown's funeral, and she was very, very enthusiastic. She called my father, like, "Whoa, didn't know." She goes, I'm trained, blah, blah, blah. And the Queen Noor of Jordan heard her and her choir and wanted to invited them to Jordan. But first, she invited them to the embassy in Washington. And she was shocked that everybody there wanted to know about Jesse Jackson. It was 1984. She said, and I was trying to figure out why do you all want to know about Jesse Jackson. I was like, oh my gosh, you did not know that the whole Arab world, the whole global South, were pulling for this black man to take it to the biggest empire on earth. That's what you mean, Turi. When people read what you write, when you go around the world and you come back and you establish a Black Palestinian collective, that means so much. It resonates. Because really, so the people who are really, really so deeply embedded in the struggle never left there. They stayed. And I can't thank you enough. And if there's anything that I can do, because I have an obligation, I think, to share these stories. I'll speak to you, Solomon. You said, didn't Trump provide a floor for the Reverend Jackson campaign at the Trump Plaza in New York City for free in the 80s? No, that's not true. Let me tell you what happened. I'll never forget the day. We were winding up the 88 campaign, and we were in the hotel lobby. My father was walking through, obviously, with the Secret Service. And it was like, Daddy, so, because I knew he was going somewhere. And I was on my way to California that night. But he was on his way to New Jersey for the Mike Tyson fight that Don King had invited him to. The Mike Tyson fight was at Trump's casino in Atlantic City. Then Citizen Trump was very gracious. He met my father at the hotel and escorted him into the fight. Of course, there were tens of thousands of people there. Jesse Jackson is microwave hot. And so you see them walking in together. Actually, I performed with Willie Pickens' daughter, Bethany, at the DuSable. So never with him, but with his daughter, who is equally great. And so there's a myth that Donald Trump supported Reverend Jackson in his campaigns. No. What he did do, though, was when we started the Wall Street Project to bring blacks and women, but starting with blacks, onto Wall Street, he gave Reverend office space for a year, which was a very generous thing for him to do. That was like in 99, 90, 2000. And what he was doing then, he was also considering running for president on Ross Perot's ticket. So, and Reverend relates to some of everybody, but no, he did not endorse and support Reverend in his campaign and in the 80s. No, he did not. Some famous whites who did, Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson. Bernie Sanders was one of only 2 white elected officials who endorsed, not just endorsed, he ran our campaigns in Vermont. And through the running of those campaigns, he was able to go to the U.S. House of Representatives and then to the Senate. Paul Wellstone came out of our campaign. He ran the campaign in Minnesota. Excuse me. So I can tell you the white folks who supported Reverend, and I can tell you that Casey Kasem, who before you were born, or maybe when you were too young to remember, he was the biggest DJ in the country at America's Top 40. He was Lebanese, and because Reverend had stepped out for the Palestinians, the whole Arab community embraced him because they knew how many hits he was taking. For example, I
Mm.
was blessed out in my Harvard interview, even though they recruited me. I was a merit scholar, but it was a horrible interview. But I was accepted, but they said it was a big fight to get
Mm.
me to the committee. Yale, I had no fight. Harvard, huge fight, huge,
Mm.
huge.
Mm.
Dr. Allen Count, who's now passed on, called my mother and said, "We had a fight on our hands. We got her through." And my mother, I can't repeat what she said here, but she said, because my mother's a real one. She said, "I never wanted her to go to school anyway, because Carter G. Woodson said Harvard has ruined more good black minds than bad liquor.
Mm.
My daughter has a full scholarship to Howard. She even has one to Spelman. That's all I asked her to do. So if you think I'm going to insult black people and the most esteemed black school in the world
Mm.
and tell them no," she said, "You out of your mind." She said, "Are you tenured?" She said, "By the way, are you tenured?"
Mm.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not, because I know how they do you up there. Because Poussaint, Alvin Poussaint, the great black psychiatrist, he stays in my home. He's one of my best friends.
Mm.
Okay. So I know who came out, who supported us. It's okay, Solomon. I'm glad I can give you clarification and you can pass it on. And so, because it's important, because I would never take that credit from Donald Trump. That's why when
Mm.
ask Reverend about Donald Trump now, he will tell you he's not the guy that I knew. Because what I'm seeing, the person who makes these incendiary remarks, I didn't know that. Now, mind you, I lived in New York when he went after the Central Park Five. I haven't gotten over that.
Yeah.
Okay. That having been said, okay. So, but I will tell you, no, he did do that when we started that Wall Street project. He did do
Mm.
that, and he's had some great relationships with the Don Kings and with the Mike Tysons, and not
Right.
just he's had some really good relationships with black business people. He has.
Mm.
He has. And in fact, Curry, he went on a tour as he went on an exploratory tour prior to his launching his campaign with black businessmen all over the country.
Huh. You
He
mean this
won
this time around?
in 2015.
Huh.
He wanted to know if it was feasible, his bid was feasible, and if he ran, what do you all want? What is it that you need? What is it that you're looking for? What are you
Yeah.
missing? He's not a Republican. That's why the Republicans don't like him. He's not a Democrat. He's been more Democrat than he's been Republican, but he's
Sure.
transactional.
Yeah.
That's why this whole thing with Putin ought not throw you off, because he didn't lie.
Yeah.
Putin, if the red line has always been, that was the deal when Germany reunified, or should I say reunified, came back together. They would not expand NATO toward Russia. They would
Mm.
have an eastward expansion. America lied. They reneged.
Mm.
They didn't renege. They just lied. They started expanding, and
Mm.
so now look at the map. Look at the map. The
Mm-hmm.
map when Germany, when East and West came together. Look at the map. Those were not NATO nations. But now all of the nations
Right.
except Ukraine are NATO.
Right.
So it's like, everybody, come on, y'all. So let's just stop. So that's why I'm not. The thing is, I know that the country's in trouble, in real trouble, financial trouble, but it's in spiritual trouble. It's where Dr. King said we would be,
Mm.
which is why I appreciate your reading his texts. You've read that. I appreciate your reading and understanding of Black history, because you have to know that we're so important to the world, everybody.
Yeah.
And Curry, I think if we understood just how important we are to everybody in this world, we'd walk a little taller.
Yeah.
And we have to let people know just how much regard people have for us. And we need to recover that pride. We have to recover that.
Yes.
I mean, and I want to thank you for being the inspiration for this conversation today, because I never want to just have these conversations about Black History Month. Oh, look at what Black people can do. Black people invented everything. So I'm over that.
Right.
E.T.
Right.
didn't build pyramids, Black folks did.
Right.
No, and not those light skinned Egyptians we see today. I mean, dark skinned ones. Like
Nubians.
okay. So I mean, I clearly have no problems with lighter skinned people. I
Uh-huh.
ain't got that. But that ain't what we talking about here. You
Right.
ain't gonna be under that sun and stay light. You for real? No. And you gonna put something on top of your head lest your brain get cooked. The first
Mm,
thing they gave us was woolly hair. So and my mother said, so you could be guarded against the sun.
mm,
If you were going to
mhm,
be in cold climes, your hair was going to be flat. It would keep you warm.
mm.
That's all. Race is not this. This ain't real.
Yeah.
This is not real. So I mean, so what do you want people to know, Curry? What do you want them to know?
I think I want folks to know how long our folks have been fighting,
Mhm.
but also like just to put things in perspective, you know? Um and and I'll just illustrate that with a quick example. One time I had the great honor of speaking before a group of uncles in the Moraine Valley, outside of Chicago, Palestinian, you know, um, folks my elder, and I was posed the question, what do I want them to know, about Black America, about the Black freedom struggle,
Mhm.
and I said, I have such respect for Palestinian folks and for your struggle. You've been dealing with this horrific colonization for a century. It's been a century of violence. They nodded, and I said, for us, it's been 4 centuries.
Mm.
And I could see they kind of were like, okay, you know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
puts things in perspective. It does. It's not that you know it's better or worse than it's just, but it puts things in perspective and it gives you a frame. Because I think, like, and I get in conversations, with my peers who are rightly so frustrated because we live in this horrific situation, and we got to put things in perspective. You know what I mean? And think about not only, right, like what all is the kind of how deep the well is that we're drawing from, um, and that within that, like, we just have so much to learn. One of the things that when I learned the fact that the Montgomery bus boycott, that Rosa Parks was arrested on a Friday and the boycott was in full swing on Monday, I was like,
Yeah.
what? I mean, with all of our social media and, phones, I cannot imagine getting the entire Black population of a city on the same page in a weekend. You know,
Well, because it was a community, not a population.
well, there you go. There you go. And but even what that means, what
Yeah.
all that means, we just have to learn.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that this time that we're in is it's very violent. It's very disorienting. It's disorienting by design, and it can feel impossible, and that that pushes people to retreat into your community, your family, yourself, and say, forget everybody else. I'm just going to protect what's mine. That's the intention. And I think that we have to not only have a more expansive outlook, but that requires courage, but that we can do it. Because when I look at what all, our folks have done, I'm like, oh, okay, we can do this. You know what I mean? Like, we can do this. So that's what I want people to know.
Well, we can continue doing this
We can continue doing this.
because
Yeah,
we've been doing this, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We
And I
we
want to
don't.
say,
Yeah, please.
and I want to say to, I mean, that's what I want to say to folks, to my peers. And what I want to say to my elders is, I know this is, again, it's these are heavy times, they're violent times, but I want to say we've got this. Like, we're gonna do this. We will find our way.
Yeah.
You know, so, and we'll do it together. We need you all. You know what I mean? But together we will find our way. We'll find it.
You know what? It's the only way that we're going to do it. They say if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go
Mm,
far, you go together. And young and old and in between, red, yellow, black, brown, and white, as my father says, we're all precious in God's sight. We're all
mm,
God's children. And that is the beauty of this struggle. And it's a beautiful struggle. I think back on some of the people who came, and these people we didn't know when Reverend announced he was running for president, and even just throughout the course of his ministry. Some of the darndest people. You said, okay. I mean, we had people who couldn't go back to their synagogues because they were standing with Jesse Jackson, who had been standing with
mm,
the Indians. Therefore, he was an enemy. And then they find out, then some of these people have come around and they've been on the show. And well, my parents didn't really feel. I said, don't feel any kind of way about telling me. It doesn't worry. It doesn't. It doesn't matter. Because when you know better, you do better. And
mm.
your parents still might not really be happy with you being here, but just know that you're welcome. And it's okay. It really is okay. It's okay. We're gonna make it.
Yeah,
We're gonna make it.
yeah.
And when I see you, I know we're gonna make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My Curie. Just a sweetheart. And wait a minute, Chaparral, and this is big, because she agrees with no one about anything. She
Mm,
said, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The black folk are tired. Yeah, we are,
yeah.
but you know what? You better, child, you as they say, don't get weary. Don't be weary in well doing. You
Mm,
they can't be more tired than our foreparents were, waiting for slavery to end, waiting
yeah.
for, I mean, fighting to get through Reconstruction, fighting to get through the lynchings, but I got to go to war and have a double V, a victory at home and a victory abroad, fighting through Reconstruction, fighting through Jim Crow. Rosa Parks said, my father asked her, why didn't you move to the back of that bus? It
Mm,
was such an easy thing for you to do. She said, when I thought of Emmett, who had been killed just 3 or 4 months before, she
mm,
had his picture in my mind. I couldn't and I wouldn't move. That's right. Correctional officer for lockdown. We are survivors and we won't give up. What did Beyonce say? But we are thrivers. We are strivers. We are the most resilient people. You can never take us out. And you just remember that. See, when we know who we are and when we know whose we are, we're going to behave
mm,
very, oh yeah, we're going to behave very differently. It's going to be a different day,
yeah.
a different day when we really come unto ourselves once again. And so, again, I thank you for this wonderful reminder because we do have to be in coalition, Curie. Just very quickly, why are coalitions so important to you?
Well, we are, I mean, the fact is, communities all around the world, we're bound up with each other, whether we know it or not.
Mm.
And it matters to know it. You know what I mean? Like, we're stronger when we're aware of it. You know, so and the thing is, the folks who and the kind of systems and institutions that work to maintain this violence, this exploitation, this poverty, this inequality, they know it. Like, they actually understand how integrated, how the fates of young Black folks in this country and folks being displaced from Central America and forced to come here, and folks in Palestine, and like, they see it. They see the connections, which is why there is so much. I mean, they're in coalition. You know what I mean? Like, the U.S. government's in coalition with the Israeli government. Why did Marco Rubio fly down to El Salvador? Because he's like, we see eye to eye here. Our project is transnational. So they're aware, and we should be aware of all the connections too. We'll be stronger.
Yeah. If the imperialists can be connected, and they're connected because they know they must be.
Yeah.
Those who fight for freedom can dare not do any less.
Mm.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Come on, everybody.
That's right.
We can't rest. The struggle continues. And victory is certain. That's the other side of that. When the struggle continues. But you're always going to be fighting. You're always going to be struggling.
Mm.
Always, always. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you've lost. It means that you don't want to lose where you came from. Remove not the ancient landmark which our fathers and mothers have set. See, if you stop struggling, you forget. You forget all that came before you. You do that.
Yeah. Mm.
So we can't do that because the civil rights movement never ended. We won our rights, but Dr. King and Reverend Leon Sullivan out of Philadelphia said we must move from civil rights to silver rights.
Mm.
If I can sit at the Woolworth counter, but I don't have a quarter to buy a drink.
Right.
I can't buy anything. I can't buy a hamburger. So now I need, this is an economics. This system is driven by
Right.
money.
Right.
All the racialization. Well, it's driven by the economy. That's all.
Right.
All you have to do is look around at all of us. Oh, people have been mixing it up for a long time. So let's cut that out. Okay. So that ain't even real. It ain't never been real. What they don't want to do is have your money. What they don't want to do is have the adequate distribution of the wealth. That's what that is.
That's right.
That part. Okay. And what they don't want is, so I want you all to like and share the show. That's right, for show, Robert. Like and share the show because my algorithms, Facebook suppressed them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pass this show around, we can get beyond them. I've looked around, and some of my shows have now reached up to like 1.5 to 2 million views. There was a time when I was getting 3 million views a week. But I guess my politics, I know they were too progressive. But what I need you to do is pass the show along, everybody. I know many people have said that they want to see me on more mainstream media. Mainstream media does not want to see me. Solomon, what'd you say? I wish you could be on more mainstream media shows sharing your perspective. No, it's needed, but that's not what they want. This is what you want. And this is what the people need. So help me to get to the people. That's all. I'm not worried about them. They can catch up to us. I'm not trying to conform to them. I want them to come over this way. And if I go over there, I know I'll have to do some things in order, but I'll do what I need to do if I'm called upon to do that again. Ironically enough, the place where I had the most space was at Fox.
That is ironic. Wow.
Yeah, if they gave me the space.
Wow.
I mean, because I was, but I also handled myself a particular way so that I would not be disrespected, our people would not be disrespected. And, and I'm not doctrinaire. I'm like, no, I'm going to listen to you. That's why uh, I don't diminish Donald Trump here. First of all, I don't believe in that. I don't like
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
don't like any of that. That having been said, my thing is, I want to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
You have a whole body of experiences that have shaped how you think and what you believe. If we can find some daylight of agreement, because uncommitted in Michigan, they had a chunk, and up in Wisconsin and all around the country, they had a chunk of Republicans who jumped in on that because they didn't have the option in the Republican space. We can't go past them. I think the Democrats should have spoken to Robert Kennedy. They didn't have to lose him.
Mm.
And I'll tell you what, now we're asking questions that no one could ask.
Mm.
The reason that people have decided not to take a lot of these medicines because they have a lot of questions that they were not free to ask anymore.
Yeah.
This is the only class of medicines that can't be where you can't sue,
Mm.
even if you get injured.
Mm.
No, 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 no. This is someone who has been a world-renowned environmentalist, and suddenly you're saying that you don't want to hear anything from him.
Right.
You're gonna listen to the mainstream media who lie routinely. They don't even tell you the truth about yourself.
Mm.
Stop, y'all, really. So they just affirmed Cash Patel. So we'll see.
Right.
I'm not vested in anyone. I'm
Mm-hmm.
vested in truth. So we said, be careful what you pray for, Corey.
Mm.
Because the gift never comes wrapped up in the package that you think. God gives it to
Mm.
you the way God gives it to you. We said we wanted change. We're getting it.
Right.
And what we're also getting is a lot of things are getting revealed, and we can't just reject them because they're emanating from a place that we don't like. We have to start
Mm-hmm.
saying, wait a minute. Well, now that is wrong and that is off. So let's stop this. Let's talking at and let's start listening to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and let's work with what we've got right now.
Yeah.
They're going to eliminate the Department of Education. Well, how can we be assured and how can we ensure that the schools that we have work for our children? I just had
Mm-hmm.
an educator on my show, Dr. Sonia Whitaker, brilliant educator. I
Mm.
did not know all the things that you need to be asking in your little ecosystem called a school. In many Black and Brown communities, many of the teachers are not certified, Corey.
Mm. Mm.
I said, wait a minute. What? She said, oh, yeah. You need to go to your principal and ask how many teachers in this school are certified, and it does is my child's teacher one of those certified teachers.
Yeah.
I said, whoa, we don't even know the questions to ask.
Right.
So come on. So let's start asking some questions, and let's start figuring out, while Bad Ass and all these other people at the White House on Black History, at the Black History Month celebration, while he's releasing people from jail, maybe what we can do is ask him, well, why you are inclined to release these guys, what about the people who Biden locked up in 1994?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Since he wouldn't do anything about that, see, he could have, by a stroke of the pen, let all those people go. He didn't do
Mm-hmm.
that. He did that with his family.
Right.
Okay, I got you. Well, maybe we have a little space with this one to say, hey, we got a lot of people locked up on a lot of on that which people are making money off of now, young white kids in
Mm.
the West.
Mm-hmm.
Can we negotiate with you about that? We did lose 40,000 kids in HBCUs in the Obama years. Is there any way that we can work that out? Can we restore some
Mm.
of the people?
Mm.
Yeah, look, I'm looking for a way out, y'all.
Yeah. Mm.
I'm looking for a way out. And I am going to bring Dr. Whitaker back. I'm going to bring her back on next week because we're going to walk through what you need to do to find out what you need to find out in your child's school, in the school district, in the city or town where you are, in the county, in the state, and what we need to be fighting for on the national level for education.
Mm.
We can do that. We don't have to suffer. What we have to do is struggle.
Mm.
Maybe if we struggle, we'll appreciate all those who struggled before us, truly. If you start struggling, maybe you won't say, we have not come far.
Right,
But when
right,
you say
right.
that, you insult Kwame Ture, you insult
Right.
James Bevel, you insult Abernathy, you insult Fannie Lou Hamer, you insult Frederick Douglass, you insult Harriet Tubman. You ain't have to pull out no gun and pull somebody off a plantation. What do you mean things haven't changed?
Right. Right, right, right.
Yeah, that ain't your struggle, sugar. No. So I think that you are Dr. Barbara Sizemore. Did you know she was our cousin by marriage?
Hmm.
She was the superintendent of schools in Washington, D.C. My grandmother, my father's mother, is a Sizemore. And interestingly, you know that actor Tom Sizemore, who had all of these addiction problems,
Hmm.
he was a cousin too. He was the white Sizemores. You know? Well, my Aunt Claire said, you know, he's a Sizemore because he has a drinking issue. So she put it quite a little bit more colorfully than that.
Yeah,
But there's a go. But that's right, Dr. Sizemore, she was serious. And we have to be that serious. And so I want you all to support. Do you have a Substack, Curry?
Not yet, but I'll let you know.
You're gonna get it. And when you get it, I want people. I will be one of your first subscribers. No, I'm very serious. You have to do that because I'm gonna get one, and you have to do that. It's very important, and I want people to support you because you absolutely deserve that. Getting to meet you and having you be in my space has been one of the great gifts that I've gotten in 2025. I will forever love Phyllis Minnis, who I always love. I just love her anyway. But she said, I've got someone for you. She had no idea that she was giving me the gift of a lifetime.
Oh, it's such an honor.
I got me a little nephew. There you go.
It's true. And I have an auntie.
That's right, because I'm an elder.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. I'm that woman. I'm a grown. There you go. But I thank you so much, and thank you for all that you're doing. And so continue to look at your texts because you know you'll be hearing from me very soon.
Thank you.
Yes, sending you so much love.
Right back at you. Thank you.
Bye, sweetie.
Bless you.
I love you, everybody. Have a good night. Say good night to everybody, Curry.
Good night.
Love you all. All right.